Risotto!
Wow!
I came in hard on that. All right, so a lot of people ask me about this one. Making risotto. Risotto is just a really, really rich and creamy starch-based dish. It's arborio rice or any short grain rice that's cooked with a lot of stock. Breaks it down, it's just like meltingly tender, finished with Parmesan or any other ingredients, because you can have like lobster risotto, you can have red pepper risotto, you can have roasted vegetable risotto, mushroom risotto, risotto Milanese, which is the risotto with the saffron, which is kind of the basic risotto, which we'll be making today. But first, I want to talk about
basic risotto.
Basic risotto. What's risotto? Risotto is not a rice, right? People think like, oh, buy me some risotto, like in regards to a rice. Risotto is the technique, it is not the rice grain. The technique of cooking in the style of risotto is when you take any starchy grain and you slowly cook it in a liquid by adding the liquid in batches and constantly stirring to break down the exterior starch. You cook it in batches so that all that starch doesn't evaporate and that starch cooks back into the rice dish. So the method of pouring and stirring and pouring and stirring until it's kind of like meltingly tender and creamy, that is the process of risotto. Risotto, the grain itself, can be done with any short grain rice. Actually, you don't even have to use rice. You could use farro, you can use barley, you can use quinoa. Any grain that has like a really thick exterior starch to it that breaks down into the liquid to make it kind of a creamy finish can be used for risotto, the dish itself.
But if they're thinking risotto, I would just say go for the arborio.
Yes, arborio is the most classic rice that's used, which is a short grain. We'll break this out. The arborio rice is very similar to like a short grain sushi rice, which is typically like a calrose. That's why sushi rice is so sticky, right? Is because of the starch that's on the exterior. So this is what you're looking for versus a long grain rice, which is more of like a jasmine rice or a basmati rice. But typically we think in terms of like short grain, long grain, and this is the arborio. So what we're gonna do though, there's no set recipe here. It's the process, it's the technique. Some people like their risotto very al dente, which is like almost crunchy to the tooth. That's typically what you'll find in Italy. And then some people like their risotto, Americans, a lot more cooked, mushier, right? A la gruel. And I mean the porridge, not the person.
Not us.
Not us.
Okay.
Well, we're the gruels now. Formerly Galindo, which is from her a Mexicano side of the family.
What is a Mexican? What is that?
No, it's like part Spanish, part Mexican, and I created my own language.
Yes.
So we're only gonna do probably like a cup of this risotto because it expands. So it's probably gonna create like 3 cups of finished product. She left me. And for the base of the risotto, I'm just gonna do like some garlic and onion. I'm gonna keep this really simple because I want everybody to learn the technique.
Do we have to, because I know when I make like my Mexican rice, I toast
You toast the grains, yes, 100%.
And you'll toast them.
That's going to be
well.
a huge part of this. So I try and make this dish for Lauren at least once a week, the risotto.
No way, ladies. This would do nothing.
Wait, why
good.
ladies? We're gonna do just a nice small dice on this, or like medium-sized dice. Okay, so just
that is interesting.
I do like a rough chop on there, okay? And then I take
some salt.
I take a little bit of salt as an abrasive, and that also draws some of the moisture out. And then I'll chop it one more time with the salt, and then take your knife. Now you can also use a garlic press, although I like the presence of the salt in there because it pulls out some of the bitter flavors. And just crush it with your knife. Okay. So just a little chop on this. I want some integrity to my garlic, so I'm not gonna mince it fine.
Love that.
I'm gonna do like 2 tablespoons of butter to start. This is just 1 medium-sized onion. Okay, you wanna salt that, Lauren?
Sure.
Now we're gonna let this sweat. We're not gonna caramelize it, we're not gonna brown it, we're just gonna release some of that bitter flavor and we're just gonna slowly sweat it down. And that's also gonna add a ton of flavor. Because remember, we're only adding a few ingredients to this risotto because we want that starch and the aromatic to shine through. Plus we're gonna finish it with saffron. So that's gonna be delicious. Let's pull a wooden spoon out here because that is essential for risotto, is a wooden spoon. The reason why a wooden spoon is so important is because you're stirring it so much that you don't want metal on metal or metal on aluminum to release any of those kind of, I don't want to say toxins, but right, like you don't want to be scraping up your pan. You want to really just be gently stirring, which is why people use a wooden spoon. I also would not use a non-stick pan. Make sure you use like a cast iron or a heavy bottom pot to make your risotto. Salt salting in the stages, as we've talked about in the past. We salt it in the very beginning because we want those onions to absorb a lot of that seasoning, and the salt also draws out the moisture quicker, so they'll steam quicker, and we'll be able to get this process moving. So we'll switch it out here. There you go. There you go. Okay, so onions are sauteing in the butter. I got some garlic here. Now, I'm gonna keep letting these onions saute. What people often do is cook their garlic and their onions together, but the garlic only needs to cook for like 45 seconds or a minute. You want it to get nice and redolent, and then you stop the cooking process by deglazing. So now I have my garlic.
Okay, so
So
now
I'm just going to deglaze it with like maybe a quarter cup of white wine.
Yum. This smells. Oops.
Okay, so now I'm gonna add my rice to this. Okay, you can toast these, which will make the grains stronger. We added our liquid early, but it's fine. We're not making the world's most famous risotto here. Like when you're making a chili, you're gonna add your chilies and you're gonna add your chili spice, ground spice to the fat, and it's gonna bloom in the fat. Saffron's the opposite. It will stop the blooming process, so you have to bloom saffron in a liquid and not a fat.
Right. So
now we've reduced all that wine down. You gotta cook that alcohol out. Now, we're going to add some of this chicken stock in. Okay, this is just chicken stock. That entire thing of saffron was like $100.
That is wild.
That's the foot I'm talking about. It smells like a sock drawer.
Let me smell.
It comes out as a good flavor though, so I'm just gonna do a little bit of saffron in here. Okay, and let that bloom. For right now, I don't want to add too much salt in the beginning because we're going to keep reducing this down,
right,
and that's going to concentrate the salt, so we're not going to be able to gauge exactly how much salt we need, so I'll start to add it in a little bit more towards the end.
So,
and I'll turn this temperature down.
Just so people know, so like when you're cooking risotto and you're putting in the stock, you know, incorporating it slowly, you want it to basically like reduce down and then add more, like how, you know.
Yeah, you reduce it down until it's almost sticking to the sides or the bottom, and then you add more, and then let it reduce down a little bit more. Keep stirring, keep breaking the starch, the exterior starch up, and keep adding, break down, add, break down.
And do we have to constantly stir?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't need to stand
you don't
over
have to
here
sit
for,
here
like-
and constantly stir. The fact is that just the mere boiling is releasing a lot of the starch, right? Because it's agitating it. The stirring is important because you don't want it to stick. Once that risotto starts to stick and that starch starts to stick, there's a snowball effect. Starch begets more starch. So you will very quickly end up having a sticky, starchy mess on the bottom of the pan that starts to then ultimately burn or brown, which changes the flavor, but it also, you lose that starch to the edges or the bottom of the pot. That's why you want to keep stirring. So the breakdown of the starch is really happening by virtue of the simmer. However, the stirring itself is preventing any of that stickage. All right, while our risotto is simmering and marinating in its own starch, we're gonna talk Parmesan for a second here. So this is Parmigiano Reggiano, right? Where does that come from? What does that mean? There's so many different types of Parmesan. Well, Parmesan cheese is kind of like a style of cheese, but the true Parmesan comes from the Emilia-Romagna region. Region of Italy. That's the Reggiano, right? It's aged 2 years. It's just this deep, crystallized Parmesan with the cows from that particular region. Now, there's also a Parmesan, also known as a red cow Parmesan, and that's comes from the breed red cow. And that particular type of cow's milk is so high in protein that when you age it, you get these unbelievable protein crystals that age into the Parmesan. So when you bite into a good Parmesan, you actually get like a little crystallization that you can taste. A good Parmesan is so important. We've talked about umami in the past. You get that savory richness from cheese, right? From umami, or that umami from a Parmesan, a good Parmesan. Now, they make some fair Parmesan here in the United States, Belgioso, different types of cheese brands. It's all about the quality of the milk and the actual aging process itself. Any type of cheese that's like a quick cheese that you amplify the aging process takes away from the integrity of the cheese, and you're gonna taste it. So if you can get yourself a good Parmesan, go ahead and do that. If anything, just get a fresh block of Parmesan, regardless of the quality. It's still better than any of that pre-grated Parmesan, because especially when it comes to Parmesan, it has a tendency to stick because of those milk crystals. So they add anti-caking agents to the pre-shredded Parmesan, which is actually just powdered cellulose, which is wood pulp.
You could hear
You can
it.
hear the crystals.
Yeah. That is funny. Okay, I'm gonna check on our risotto.
Oh my gosh, this is like, you can smell this, right? It's sweet, it's nutty, it's somewhat floral. Peeling it. Oh no, one of them fell in my mouth. Oh gosh. So a pile of Parmesan. Now this whole process is gonna take like 30 minutes because you wanna slowly cook this down. We're probably halfway through right now, but you can see that the rice grains are actually starting to expand and they're cooking. You wanna make sure that it's not crunchy, but that it's creamy, but it still has integrity, like you're biting the rice grain. It doesn't just break down into gruel.
Why do you keep saying that?
Because I'm trying to reintroduce gruel. I'm trying to
Make the word cool
redefine
again?
gruel. Gruel can be cool. Cool gruel, drool gruel.
We're cool. That probably.
One thing you can do with risotto as well, we do this in the restaurant, is you can take it to about 80% where it's still pretty toothy, and then you can lay it out on like a plate or a sheet pan and put it in the refrigerator, and then when you want to eat it, you can bring it back up to temp again with a final dash of chicken stock or broth, finish it with butter and Parmesan, and that way it's like 80% done, and then when you want to eat it, just bring it up to temp and finish that one final cook. Final dash of liquid.
Yes.
There you go. Give it all. Give
All
it all
of it?
to me. Give it all to me.
All right.
Yep. You've got a lot of that liquid still in there, and you can tell by the size of the grain that it's almost finished. It's still pretty toothy. You can always just pull a piece out and try it. But the problem is that people will pull their risotto when it's too thick, right? Like you want this incredibly, you want almost a little bit more liquid in there. All right, so I just want you guys to see this, right? Like this is still very runny. It's gonna continue cooking and absorbing that liquid. So even keep in mind, I'm gonna add butter to this, finish the risotto with whole butter, okay? I've even got more butter, but.
More butter butt?
More butter butt. Before I taste it, I want to add the Parmesan as well, and then I'll taste the salt on the risotto, right? So now you don't want this in clumps, so make sure you kind of evenly disperse this throughout the risotto.
Some chives.
Some chives,
Big
yeah.
Surprise.
Big surprise on the chives. Now I'll finish with the chives. I'm not gonna put it into the risotto.
Can we get a bowl?
Yeah, why don't you grab a bowl. See that, how it's runny though? It's holding its own a little bit. I say it's like kind of like slightly wet sand. You don't want this, you do not want this to be tight. Fresh Parmesan. It's gonna melt into the top.
That looks so good.
There you go. Risotto seems like it's complicated to make. It is definitely in the echelon of finer dining, but risotto is actually really, really simple to make, and all that it is just rice cooked over a certain period of time with slowly adding batches of liquid so the starch doesn't evaporate, and you make a rich and creamy and very kind of like approachable rice dish. It's gotta be creamy, right? You see we made our risotto so that it's not thick, it's not overly spackled, and we just finished it with a little bit of saffron, fresh Parmesan, and herbs. And this right here is a simple weeknight dish. Do not be intimidated by risotto.
It'll just, there's some patience there though.
There is
You need
patience.
some patience.
You need patience. Risotto, like in a marriage, requires patience. However,
Love.
when you execute it properly, the ending will be silky and smooth.
Smooth?
Wait, I don't know what I'm doing there. In any case, for the risotto recipe, follow our Substack at American Gravy or at Andrew Gruel. We'll also be posting this video up on YouTube at Rumble, as well as X. And once again, all of it leads back to the written recipe, which is on the Substack. So enjoy our risotto episode.